Elena Vasquez's feet had been throbbing for the past 3 hours, but she kept her smile fixed as she navigated between tables at Sorella, Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurant. At 6 months pregnant, every shift felt like running a marathon in heels, but she needed every dollar. The baby would be here in 12 weeks, and her savings account currently held $4,347, nowhere near enough for what was coming. She refilled water glasses at table 9, her movements practiced and efficient despite the growing weight pressing against her lower back. The dining room glowed amber under Murano glass chandeliers, all white tablecloths and polished silverware catching the light. This was where Manhattan's elite came to be seen: Broadway producers, hedge fund managers, politicians who needed to discuss things away from Capitol Hill. "More bread for table 12, Marco whispered as he passed, balancing a tray of primi piatti. The head waiter had been kind to her since she'd started showing, always giving her the easier sections, though tonight's assignment was anything but easy. Table 12, the Ashford party. Elena grabbed a fresh bread basket and approached the corner booth where Victoria Ashford held court. 52 years old, with the kind of bone structure that came from generations of good breeding and better plastic surgery, Victoria was a fixture on the Manhattan social circuit. Her husband owned half the commercial real estate in Midtown, and she spent her days on charity boards and her nights reminding everyone of her importance. Tonight, she'd brought 6 friends, all cut from the same cloth designer everything, jewelry that cost more than Elena's yearly salary, voices that carried because they'd never been told to lower them. "Finally," Victoria said as Elena set down the basket. "We've been waiting forever. What kind of establishment makes guests wait for bread?" "My apologies, ma'am." Elena kept her voice neutral, professional. She'd learned in her 8 months at Sorella that engaging with complaints only made things worse. "Can I bring you anything else?" "You can bring us competent service," one of Victoria's friends said, and they all laughed. Elena felt the familiar heat in her cheeks, but kept her expression pleasant. "Of course. Your secundi will be out shortly." As she turned to leave, she heard Victoria's stage whisper, 6 months pregnant and still waiting tables? Can you imagine? Some people have no shame. The words hit like a slap. But Elena kept walking. Behind the server station, she pressed her hand against her lower back, breathing through the spike of pain that came with standing too long. The baby kicked a flutter of movement that usually made her smile. Tonight, it just reminded her how precarious everything was. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Marco appeared beside her with an espresso. "Ignore them. Rich people don't understand what real work looks like." "I'm fine." Elena took a sip. Grateful. Just 3 more hours. She wasn't fine. Her ex-boyfriend David had vanished when she told him about the pregnancy, changed his number, blocked her completely. His parting text, "Not ready to be a dad. You're on your own." So Elena was on her own, working at Sorella 5 nights a week, doing bookkeeping for her cousin's bodega during the day. Her studio in Washington Heights cost $1,800 a month, and the list of baby necessities grew longer every time she looked at it. But she would manage. She always managed. The kitchen doors swung open, and Dimitri, the head chef, caught her eye. "Elena, table 12's order is up. Tell them the veal is our best tonight." She loaded the heavy plates onto her tray, ignoring the way her lower back screamed in protest. 6 plates, perfectly arranged, steam rising from each one. The tray had to weigh 25 pounds. Normally, Marco would help her carry something this heavy, but he was dealing with a crisis at table 4. Someone claimed their truffle pasta wasn't truffly enough. Elena lifted the tray, balanced it on her shoulder the way she'd been taught, and started across the dining room. Each step required concentration. Don't wobble, don't slip, don't drop $400 worth of veal and pasta on the marble floor. She was 3 feet from table 12 when it happened. Victoria Ashford pushed back her chair without looking, standing abruptly to air-kiss someone at a nearby table. The chair shot backward directly into Elena's path. Elena tried to pivot, but the weight of the tray made her clumsy. She stumbled, caught herself on the edge of table 11, and somehow miraculously kept the tray from falling. Plates rattled but stayed put. Her heart hammered as she straightened, readjusting the tray on her shoulder. That had been close. Too close. "Excuse me," she said quietly, trying to maneuver around Victoria's abandoned chair. Victoria turned back, her expression annoyed. "Are you still standing there? Put the food down already." "Yes, ma'am. I just need to—" "Oh, for God's sake!" Victoria gestured impatiently. You're blocking the entire walkway. Elena's arms were shaking from holding the heavy tray. If you could just move your chair. Don't tell me what to do. Victoria's voice rose, attracting attention from nearby tables. You ran into my chair, and now you're making demands? I didn't, Elena started, but Victoria was already in performance mode, playing to her audience. This is exactly the problem with this place lately. The staff has become so entitled. Can you believe she's actually arguing with me? Elena felt her face burning. Ma'am, I'm not arguing. I'm just trying to serve your food. Then serve it. Elena moved carefully around the chair, finally reaching the table. She began setting down plates, her hands trembling slightly. The first 3 went down perfectly. As she reached for the 4th Victoria's veal, her balance shifted. The baby kicked hard, right into her ribcage, making her gasp. The plate tilted. Not much, maybe an inch, but enough that a small amount of the wine reduction sauce dripped onto the white tablecloth, just beside Victoria's bread plate. The table went silent. Victoria stared at the tiny dark stain no bigger than a quarter, then slowly looked up at Elena with an expression of pure contempt. You just spilled on me? I didn't spill on you, ma'am. It's on the tablecloth. Don't contradict me. Victoria's voice was ice. I felt it hit my arm. Elena looked at Victoria's arm. There was nothing there. No sauce, no stain. But she recognized that look in Victoria's eyes. This wasn't about sauce or stains. This was about power, about putting someone in their place. I apologize if, Victoria stood abruptly. You're apologizing with an if, as though I'm imagining things? That's not what I meant. Where is the manager? Victoria looked around imperiously. Someone get me the manager. This is absolutely unacceptable. Elena's manager, Thomas, materialized within seconds. He had that 6th sense for brewing conflict. Mrs. Ashford, is there a problem? Your waitress just spilled on me, then had the audacity to argue about it. Thomas looked at Elena, then at the tablecloth where the tiny stain sat. His expression was careful, diplomatic. I'm so sorry for any inconvenience, Mrs. Ashford. Let me have this cleaned immediately, and I don't want it cleaned. I want her fired. The words hung in the air. Elena's stomach dropped. Mrs. Ashford, I'm sure we can. She's clumsy. She's argumentative. And frankly, Victoria's eyes swept over Elena's pregnant belly with open disdain. She clearly can't handle this job in her condition. It's embarrassing for everyone. Please, Elena heard herself say, hating how small her voice sounded. It was an accident. I'll pay for the tablecloth replacement. You'll be quiet, Victoria snapped. Then, to Thomas. Are you going to handle this? Or do I need to speak with the owner? Thomas's jaw tightened. Elena saw the calculation in his eyes. Victoria Ashford spent thousands here every month. She brought important people. She was on the board of 3 major charities. Elena was a waitress who'd be going on maternity leave in 3 months anyway. Elena, why don't you take a break? Thomas said quietly. I'll have Marco finish this table. It wasn't a suggestion. Elena felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people. She nodded, carefully set down the remaining plates, and turned to go. She'd made it 2 steps when Victoria spoke again, her voice carrying across the dining room. And someone might want to tell her that stretchy pants aren't appropriate server attire. We come here for elegance, not... She paused, her lip curling this. Elena's maternity work pants were black, pressed, professional, but they were stretchy because nothing else fit anymore. She kept walking, her vision blurring. Behind her, Victoria's friend laughed. Victoria, you're terrible. Someone has to maintain standards. Elena pushed through the staff door into the narrow hallway that led to the kitchen and break room. She was halfway there when she heard footsteps behind her. Elena, wait. She turned to find Thomas, his expression conflicted. I need you to go home for tonight, he said quietly. What? No, please, I need these hours. I know. And you'll get paid for the full shift. Thomas ran a hand through his hair. But Mrs. Ashford is causing a scene. She's demanding you be fired, and I need to let things cool down before... You're firing me. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Elena's voice was hollow. She demands it, so you do it. That's how this works, right? Elena. I did nothing wrong. That stain was barely visible. She's just... Elena stopped herself, swallowing hard. Crying wouldn't help. Anger wouldn't help. Nothing would help because people like Victoria Ashford always won. "Take tonight off," Thomas repeated. "Come back Monday. We'll talk then." Which meant he needed the weekend to figure out how to let her go without getting sued. Elena nodded mechanically. "Fine." She went to the break room, gathered her purse and jacket, and left through the back exit without talking to anyone. The November air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp. She pulled her thin jacket tighter, but it barely closed over her belly anymore. The subway ride back to Washington Heights was a blur. Elena stared at her reflection in the dark window, seeing a 8-year-old woman who looked a decade older. Exhausted, scared, alone. At home, her studio apartment felt smaller than ever. She sat on her second-hand couch, bought from a stoop sale for $50, and finally let herself cry. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that rolled down her cheeks as she calculated and recalculated her options. If she lost this job, she'd have maybe 2 months of rent saved. Then what? Go back to her mother in the Bronx? Her mother barely managed on her nursing assistant salary as it was. Move to a shelter? The waiting lists were months long. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marco. "Thomas is an asshole. You okay?" Elena typed back. "I'm fine. Thanks for checking." She wasn't fine. She was 6 months pregnant, probably about to be fired, and wondering how she'd ended up here. 4 years ago, she'd been in college at CUNY, studying business administration. Then her father died suddenly, a heart attack at 54, and someone had to help her mother with the bills. So Elena dropped out, got a job, and told herself it was temporary. Temporary had turned into 4 years. The baby kicked again, and Elena placed her hand on her belly. "I'm going to figure this out," she whispered. "I promise." She had no idea how. What? Elena didn't know what she couldn't know was that everything that had happened tonight had been captured in perfect high definition by 8 different cameras throughout Sorella. Security cameras that fed to a private office 3 blocks away. An office where Alessandro Vitale sat in darkness, watching the footage for the 3rd time. Alessandro owned Sorella, though his name appeared nowhere in the corporate paperwork. He owned 14 other restaurants across Manhattan, 2 in Brooklyn and 1 in Queens. He owned construction companies, import businesses, and enough legitimate enterprises to make the illegitimate ones nearly invisible. At 47, he'd built an empire from nothing. His father, Salvatore Vitale, had run a small operation in the Bronx, protection, gambling, loan sharking. Alessandro had taken that foundation and turned it into something bigger, something sophisticated. He didn't break legs anymore. He didn't need to. He'd learned that real power came from controlling things people needed: food supply chains, restaurant workers' unions, the permits that determined whether a business could open or close. And he'd gone almost entirely legitimate. Almost. He still had the connections, the reputation, the network of men who owed him favors. But these days, Alessandro Vitale was just a very successful businessman. That's what his tax return said. That's what his lawyers maintained. That's what everyone believed, except the people who really knew. Alessandro had a routine. Every night at midnight, he reviewed security footage from his restaurants. Not because he suspected theft, though that happened, but because he needed to know everything that happened in his establishments. Knowledge was power. Control was safety. Tonight, he'd been reviewing Sorella's footage when he saw the incident at table 12. He watched Victoria Ashford push her chair back without looking. He watched Elena stumble, catch herself, somehow keep the heavy tray balanced. He watched her carefully maneuver around the chair, her hands shaking from the weight. He watched the moment the baby kicked. He could see it in her face, that sudden gasp and the tiny amount of sauce that dripped onto the tablecloth. He watched Victoria's performance, the false outrage, the public humiliation, and he watched Elena's face, the moment she realized she was about to lose everything over a quarter-size stain. Alessandro paused the footage, zoomed in on Victoria Ashford's face, that expression of contempt, that casual cruelty toward someone with no power to fight back. He'd seen that expression before, on the faces of people who thought their money made them untouchable, people who'd forgotten that the world had teeth. Alessandro picked up his phone and dialed. "Luca," he said when his consigliere answered. "I need everything on Victoria Ashford, everything. Finances, social connections, legal history, where she shops, where she lunches, who she's sleeping with. I want her life mapped by morning." "Problem?" Luca's voice was alert despite the late hour. "Someone forgot their manners in our restaurant." "The pregnant waitress situation?" So Luca had already seen the footage. Good. That meant he understood this wasn't a request. "What's the girl's name?" Alessandro asked. "Elena Vasquez, 28, single mother-to-be. She's been with us 8 months. Clean record, never late, never caused problems." Luca paused. "Boss, Thomas is probably going to fire her." "No, he isn't. Victoria Ashford is demanding it. She's already called twice threatening to— I don't care what she's demanding." Alessandro's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Elena Vasquez stays. Full salary. And I want her section reduced to lighter tables until after the baby comes. Set up a meeting with HR about paid maternity leave." "We don't offer paid maternity leave." "We do now." Silence on the line. Then, "Understood. What about Ashford?" Alessandro watched the frozen image of Victoria's contemptuous smile. "That woman came into my restaurant and humiliated a pregnant employee for entertainment. She made a scene, demanded consequences, treated one of my people like garbage. She spends a lot of money there. She won't be spending any more." Alessandro closed the laptop. "Bar her from all our restaurants. Permanently, quietly, no explanation needed. Just suddenly, we're always fully booked when she calls. That'll cause questions. Let her ask them." Alessandro stood, walking to the window where Manhattan glittered below. "And Luca? Find out what makes Victoria Ashford's world work. What does she care about? Where is she vulnerable? I want options." "Boss, this seems like a lot of attention for one incident. That woman looked at someone carrying my grandchild." Alessandro stopped himself. Not grandchild, just employee. But the protectiveness was the same. She looked at a pregnant woman struggling to work and decided to make her life harder for fun. "That's not a small thing, Luca. That's character." "Understood." Luca's tone had shifted to business mode. "I'll have the full report by morning." After hanging up, Alessandro sat in the darkness, thinking about the girl Elena trying to balance that heavy tray while 6 months pregnant, working because she had to, because there was no safety net, no partner, no alternative. He thought about his own daughter, Angela, now 24, and living in Milan, working as a fashion designer. She'd never had to struggle like that. He'd made sure of it. Built an empire so she'd never know what it felt like to be powerless. But he remembered, before the money, before the power, when he was 12 and watched his mother work 3 jobs to keep them fed, he remembered the way men had looked at her the same way Victoria Ashford had looked at Elena tonight. Like she was less than human. Like her struggle was entertainment. Alessandro had sworn then that he'd build something different. A world where people like his mother, people like Elena Vasquez, would be protected. Tomorrow, Victoria Ashford would learn that the world had teeth, and the bite would be devastating. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, take a quick second to like this video and share it with someone who loves powerful stories. It really helps the channel grow. Elena woke up Saturday morning to 17 missed calls. Her phone had been on silent since she got home last night. She couldn't handle more bad news. But now, staring at the call log, her stomach knotted. 12 calls from Sorella, 3 from Marco, 2 from numbers she didn't recognize. She was definitely fired. Elena sat up slowly, her back protesting every movement. The baby was active this morning, doing somersaults against her rib cage. She pressed her hand to her belly. "Easy, little one. Mama needs to think." But thinking just led to panic. Without Sorella, she had maybe 6 weeks of savings. The bodega bookkeeping brought in $800 a month, not enough to cover rent, let alone everything else. She could try to find another restaurant job, but who would hire someone 6 months pregnant? And after the baby came, who would watch her while Elena worked? Her phone buzzed. Marco called again. Elena answered. "Hey, thank God. Elena, where are you? Are you okay?" Marco's voice was frantic. "Thomas has been trying to reach you all morning." "I know. I'm assuming it will tell me I'm fired." "What? No. Elena, you need to come in. Like, now." Something happened. Elena's heart sank further. "What happened?" "I don't know exactly, but Thomas called an emergency meeting this morning." And then Mr. Chen showed up. Mr. Chen was Sorella's general manager, the person above Thomas, who usually only appeared for major problems or VIP events. Elena had met him exactly twice. "Marco, I can't lose this job. I'll apologize to Mrs. Ashford. Elena, stop. It's not that, just, can you come in, please?" Thomas, specifically, said to find you. 30 minutes later, Elena stood outside Sorella's employee entrance, her hands shaking. The restaurant didn't open until 5 p.m. on Saturdays, but the door was unlocked. Inside, she found Marco waiting. "They're in the office," he said, leading her through the empty dining room. "Elena, I think something big happened." Chen's face was like, "I've never seen him look like that." "Like what?" "Like he was scared." That made no sense. What could scare Chen? Thomas's office was on the second floor, a cramped space that smelled like espresso and paperwork. When Elena knocked, Thomas opened the door immediately. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. "Elena, good, come in." He practically pulled her inside. "Mister." Chen sat behind Thomas's desk, his expression grim. He was in his 60s, normally unflappable, but today his tie was loosened, and he looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. "Miss Vasquez," Chen said. "Please, sit down." Elena sat, her hands folded over her belly. "Am I fired?" "No." Chen's response was immediate, emphatic. "Absolutely not. In fact, we owe you an apology." Elena blinked. "What?" "What happened last night was unacceptable. A guest behaved abusively toward you, and our initial response was inadequate." Chen pulled out a folder. "We're implementing immediate changes to ensure this never happens again." Elena looked between Chen and Thomas, confused. "I don't understand." Thomas cleared his throat. "We received a communication from ownership this morning about the incident with Mrs. Ashford." "Ownership?" Elena had always assumed Sorella was owned by some corporate restaurant group. The principal owner reviewed security footage and was, Chen chose his words carefully, displeased with how you were treated. "Mrs. Ashford has been permanently banned from all our establishments." Elena's mouth fell open. "She's been banned?" "Effective immediately. Additionally," Chen slid papers across the desk, "we're adjusting your employment terms. Reduced section assignments to lighter tables. No parties larger than 4. And we're implementing paid maternity leave. 12 weeks full salary." "Paid maternity leave?" Elena's voice cracked. "But you don't offer." "We do now." Chen's expression softened slightly. "The owner was very specific about this. You're a valued employee, Miss Vasquez. What happened last night was inexcusable, and we're taking steps to make it right." Elena stared at the papers. 12 weeks paid leave. That was $15,000. Money she desperately needed. Money that would change everything. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would the owner care about one waitress?" Chen and Thomas exchanged a look. "Our owner has strong feelings about how employees are treated," Chen said carefully, "especially in situations involving," he gestured at her belly, "vulnerable circumstances." "Who is the owner?" Elena had never thought to ask before. Another look between the two men. Thomas spoke. "The ownership structure is complicated. Multiple investors, shell companies. But the principal stakeholder prefers to remain private." Which meant, none of your business. Elena should probably push back, ask more questions. But 12 weeks of paid leave, protection from abusive customers, a reduced workload. This was more than she'd dared to hope for. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you. There's one more thing." Chen pulled out another document. "We'd like you to sign this NDA. It's standard for situations involving ownership directives. Essentially, you agree not to discuss the specifics of these arrangements with press, social media, or other employees." Elena skimmed the document. It was dense with legalese, but the gist was clear. "Don't talk about why you got special treatment." She hesitated. "If you're uncomfortable with anything, we can have a lawyer review it," Chen offered. "We'll pay for the consultation." "No, it's fine," Elena signed. Whatever strings were attached to this miracle, she'd deal with them later. Right now, she needed this job. After she left the office, Marco cornered her in the break room. "What happened?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I can't really talk about it," Elena said, still dazed. "But I'm not fired. The opposite, actually." "The opposite?" "They gave me paid maternity leave." Marco's eyes widened. "Since when do we get paid maternity leave?" "Since today, apparently." Elena sank into a plastic chair. "Marco, what happened? Who complained about last night?" "No idea. But this morning, Victoria Ashford called screaming at Thomas. Said she'd been told she was banned from Sorella and wanted to know who authorized it." Thomas looked like he was going to pass out. Marco leaned against the lockers. Then Chen showed up looking grim, and they had this intense conversation in Thomas's office. I heard Chen say. The decision came from the top and it's non-negotiable. The top. Some mysterious owner who reviewed security footage and cared about pregnant waitresses. It didn't make sense. But Elena wasn't going to question it. That afternoon, she worked her shift in a daze. True to their word, she was given only small tables, couples mostly, one businesswoman dining alone. No Victoria Ashfords, no demanding parties. It was the easiest shift she'd had in months. Around 7 p.m., as she was refilling water glasses, she noticed a man at table 8. He'd been there for an hour, nursing an espresso and reading the Times. Mid-40s, dark hair silvering at the temples, expensive suit but not showy. He had the kind of presence that made people instinctively give him space, not threatening, exactly, but commanding. When Elena approached to ask if he needed anything, he looked up. His eyes were dark, assessing, not in the leering way some men looked at her, but like he was solving a complex equation. "You're Elena," he said, not a question. She froze. "Yes, sir. Have we met?" "No, but I've heard good things." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Do you have a moment?" Every instinct told Elena this was connected to what had happened this morning. "I'm working, sir. I shouldn't." "Thomas won't mind. I've already cleared it." Elena glanced toward the service station. Thomas caught her eye and nodded, which somehow made this more unsettling. Who was this man that Thomas deferred to him? She sat down carefully. "Who are you?" "Someone who believes pregnant women shouldn't be abused by customers." He sipped his espresso. "How are you feeling today? After last night?" "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar." A slight smile. "It's actually a good quality. Means you haven't had to learn." Elena's hands tightened in her lap. "Did you have something to do with what happened this morning? With Mrs. Ashford being banned?" "I had everything to do with it." "Why?" The man studied her for a long moment. "Because what she did was wrong. Because no one should come into my restaurant and humiliate my employees. And because," he paused, "I have a daughter. If she were in your position, I'd want someone to protect her." "Your restaurant," Elena repeated. "You're the owner. One of them. The paperwork is complicated." He stood, leaving cash on the table, a $100 bill for a $5 espresso. "Take care of yourself, Elena. And your baby. You're in good hands here." He walked out before she could ask his name. Marco appeared immediately. "Who was that?" "I have no idea. But the $100 bill suggested someone with money. The way Thomas had deferred to him suggested someone with power. And the look in his eyes, protective, almost paternal, suggested someone who'd meant what he said about having a daughter." Elena pocketed the money and went back to work, filing this mystery away with all the other strange things about today. 3 blocks away, in his private office, Alessandro ended the call with Luca and reviewed the file on his desk. Victoria Ashford's life, mapped in excruciating detail. Married to Gerald Ashford, real estate developer. Net worth, approximately $340 million. Victoria's personal assets, $50 million in trust funds and investments. She sat on the boards of the Metropolitan Museum, the New York Public Library, and the Riverside Children's Hospital. She lunched at La Grenouille on Tuesdays, got her hair done at Frederick Fekkai on Fridays, and had standing appointments at Bergdorf Goodman every Saturday. More interesting, she was having an affair with Marcus Chen, no relation to Sorella's Chen, a married hedge fund manager. They met at a discreet hotel in Midtown every Thursday afternoon. Even more interesting, her husband Gerald was in the middle of a massive development project in Hudson Yards. A $600 million mixed-use tower that required permits, union labor, and construction supplies, all things Alessandro controlled. "What's the play?" Luca asked from the doorway. He'd arrived 20 minutes ago with additional files. Alessandro tapped the development paperwork. "Gerald Ashford is using Moretti Construction for his Hudson Yards project, correct?" Moretti Construction, one of Alessandro's companies, structured through enough shell corporations that the Vitali name appeared nowhere. "Correct. They're scheduled to pour foundation next month. Already behind schedule and over budget. What happens if Moretti suddenly develops equipment problems?" Luca smiled slowly. "Project delays, cost overruns. Gerald misses his deadline with the investors. And if the permits hit unexpected snags? More delays. More costs." Luca pulled up a document on his tablet. "Boss, if this project stalls, the Ashfords are looking at penalty clauses worth $30 million. Plus Gerald would have to renegotiate financing at higher rates." Alessandro studied Victoria's photo, that same contemptuous expression from the security footage. "I want you to understand something, Luca. This isn't just about revenge. This is about teaching a lesson. What lesson? That cruelty has consequences. That you can't treat people like garbage just because you have money. Alessandro closed the file. Victoria Ashford walked into my restaurant and humiliated a pregnant woman who was trying to do her job. She demanded that woman be fired. She made a spectacle of someone vulnerable for her own entertainment. So we make her vulnerable. No. Alessandro's voice was cold. We make her understand what it feels like to be powerless. To watch something important to her crumble and be unable to stop it. Luca nodded slowly. When do we start? Monday morning. I want Moretti's equipment to develop mysterious mechanical failures. I want permit applications to get lost in bureaucracy. I want union representatives to suddenly have concerns about working conditions. Alessandro stood, walking to the window. And I want all of it to look completely legitimate. No threats, no violence, no obvious connections. What about the affair? We could leak it to Gerald. Not yet. That's the nuclear option. Alessandro watched the city lights. First, we let them struggle. Let Victoria watch her husband stress about money. Let her see what it's like when powerful people make your life difficult, and you can't do anything about it. She'll never connect it to the restaurant. She doesn't need to. She just needs to suffer enough to remember that other people suffer too. Alessandro turned back. What about Elena Vasquez? Any issues with her ex-boyfriend? Luca consulted his notes. David Reyes, age 29, marketing consultant, disappeared when she told him about the pregnancy, changed his number, moved to Boston for work. No child support, no contact. Find him. I want to know everything. Where he works, where he lives, who he reports to. You thinking of applying pressure? I'm thinking a man who abandons his pregnant girlfriend deserves some consequences too. Alessandro's jaw tightened. But that's a separate project. First, we focus on Ashford. After Luca left, Alessandro pulled up the security footage again. He watched Elena carefully set down those plates. Watched her try to navigate around Victoria's chair. Watched her face when she realized she was about to lose everything. He thought about Angela, his daughter. She was safe in Milan, building her career, living in a world he'd created where men like David Reyes couldn't hurt her, and women like Victoria Ashford couldn't humiliate her. But Elena didn't have that protection. She was alone, pregnant, struggling. And for some reason Alessandro couldn't quite articulate. That bothered him more than it should. Maybe because he remembered his mother at that age. Giovanna Vitali, widowed at 27 when Alessandro's father was killed in a construction accident, though everyone knew it wasn't an accident. She'd raised Alessandro alone, working 3 jobs, taking abuse from bosses and customers and landlords because she had no choice. Alessandro had been 12 when he swore he'd build something different. A world where people like his mother would be protected. He'd built that world. An empire where his money and power could shield people who needed shielding. Elena Vasquez needed shielding. And Victoria Ashford needed to learn that some people couldn't be bullied with impunity. Monday morning would be educational for everyone involved. Victoria Ashford's Saturday had started perfectly. Brunch at St. Ambrose with the girls. Shopping at Bergdorf where she'd found a Divine Valentino dress. And now she was meeting Marcus at their usual hotel. Marcus Chen, 40 years old, devastatingly handsome, rich enough to keep things interesting. His wife was in the Hamptons with the kids, which meant they had all afternoon. You seem distracted, Marcus said as they lay in the hotel bed afterward. That restaurant I told you about, Sorella, they banned me. Victoria was still furious about it. Can you believe that? After all the money I've spent there, and they banned me because some pregnant waitress couldn't do her job. Which restaurant is that? Italian place in Tribeca. Supposed to be exclusive. Victoria scrolled through her phone. I've been trying to find out who owns it so I can complain properly. But the ownership structure is deliberately opaque. Multiple shell companies. Marcus went very still. Sorella in Tribeca? Yes, why? Victoria. Marcus sat up, his expression suddenly serious. That restaurant is owned by Alessandro Vitali. Who? You don't know who Alessandro Vitali is? Marcus stared at her. Jesus. Victoria. The man controls half the construction in Manhattan. He's connected to every major development, every union, every... He stopped himself. Connected how? Marcus chose his words carefully. Let's just say that when Alessandro Vitali wants something to happen, it happens. And when he wants something to stop happening, it stops. So he's what, some kind of gangster? Victoria laughed. I'm serious. Marcus was getting dressed now, his movements quick and nervous. If Vitaly banned you from his restaurant, that's not just a ban. That's a message. A message saying what? That you pissed off the wrong person. Marcus pulled on his shirt. Victoria, my firm does business with some of Vitaly's companies. Indirectly, through intermediaries, but still, if he thought I was associated with someone he'd marked as a problem, you're overreacting. Am I? 3 years ago, a developer tried to cut Vitaly out of a deal. Within a month, that developer's projects were drowning in permit delays and union disputes. Within 6 months, he was bankrupt. Marcus grabbed his jacket. I can't see you anymore. What, because of some restaurant owner? Because you don't understand how this city actually works. Marcus headed for the door. Be careful, Victoria. And for God's sake, don't go making more scenes about this. He left. Victoria sat on the bed, confused and annoyed. This was ridiculous. Some restaurant owner, no matter how connected, wouldn't care about one customer complaint. She'd make a few calls, clear this up, maybe have Gerald mention it to someone on the city council. This would all be resolved by Monday. What Victoria didn't know was that by Monday, her world would already be crumbling, and Alessandro Vitaly would be watching every moment of it. Monday morning started with a phone call that made Gerald Ashford's blood pressure spike. What do you mean the equipment isn't working? He was in his office by 7 a.m., already reviewing the Hudson Yards timeline. They were 3 weeks behind schedule. They couldn't afford more delays. Frank Morrison, the site supervisor, sounded exhausted. I mean exactly that, Mr. Ashford. 3 cement mixers, 2 excavators, and a crane all down with mechanical failures. The cement company says their trucks are having transmission issues. They can't deliver until next week at the earliest. Next week? We're supposed to pour foundation on Wednesday. I'm aware, sir. But without equipment and cement, we can't pour anything. Gerald hung up and immediately called Moretti Construction, the contractor handling the heavy machinery and union labor. The project manager, Tony Brescia, answered on the 3rd ring. Tony, what the hell is happening with my equipment? Mechanical failures, Mr. Ashford. These things happen with heavy machinery. We're working on repairs. How long? A pause. Hard to say. Could be a few days. Could be longer. Could be longer? Tony, every day we're delayed costs me $100,000 in penalty clauses. I need those repairs done now. We're doing our best. Tony's voice was professionally sympathetic but utterly unhelpful. These are complex machines. Can't rush safety protocols. Gerald ended the call and stared at his computer screen, where the Hudson Yards budget spreadsheet glared back at him. They were already $40 million over budget. Another week of delays meant renegotiating with the investors, possibly losing financing altogether. His assistant knocked. Mr. Ashford, the Department of Buildings is online too. Something about your permits. The permits had been approved 3 months ago. What could possibly... Mr. Ashford, this is Karen Chen from the DOB. The voice was bureaucratically pleasant. We've received some concerns about your Hudson Yards project. Environmental impact questions regarding groundwater displacement. Those concerns were addressed in our original application. Yes, but new information has come to light. We'll need to conduct an additional review. Shouldn't take more than 60 to 90 days. 90 days? We break ground this week. I'm afraid not, Mr. Ashford. All construction is suspended pending the environmental review. You'll receive official notification by end of business today. Gerald hung up, his hands shaking. This couldn't be coincidence. Equipment failures and permit problems on the same day? He called his lawyer, Richard Moss, who'd handled city permits for 20 years. Gerald, slow down, Richard said after hearing the situation. Let me make some calls. An hour later, Richard called back, his voice grim. I talked to my contacts at the DOB. This environmental review came from high up. Someone with serious pull wanted your project stopped. Who? They wouldn't say. But Gerald, I've seen this before. When someone powerful wants to make problems for a developer, they don't make threats. They just make the bureaucracy come alive. Suddenly, every permit needs triple review. Every concern becomes a crisis. Everything that used to take days takes months. Can we fight it? Sure, in court, for the next year, while your project sits frozen and your investors lose patience. Gerald ended the call and sat in silence. His office looked the same: mahogany desk, leather chairs, Manhattan skyline view, but something fundamental had shifted. He'd gone from successful developer to helpless victim in the span of 2 hours. Victoria walked in around 10 a.m., carrying shopping bags from Madison Avenue. "Darling, you look terrible. What's wrong?" "Hudson Yards is dead in the water. Equipment failures, permit problems, everything happening at once." Gerald loosened his tie. "I'm looking at $30 million in penalty clauses if we can't start construction by Friday. Can't you just pay someone to fix it? Grease the right palms?" "It doesn't work that way anymore." Gerald rubbed his temples. "Someone with serious power is doing this, and I don't know who or why." Victoria's stomach did an uncomfortable flip. She thought about Marcus's warning, about Alessandro Vitale, about the way Marcus had fled the hotel room like she was radioactive. "Gerald," she said carefully, "do you know who owns Sorella? That Italian restaurant in Tribeca?" "What? Why?" "Just do you." "I know." "No idea. Why does it matter?" Victoria sat down slowly. "Because I got banned from there last week. Because I made a scene about a waitress. Because Marcus said the owner was someone you don't cross." "No reason," she said. "Just curious." But her hands were trembling as she set down her shopping bags. By Tuesday morning, 3 more problems had emerged for the Ashford development. The union representing the crane operators announced safety concerns and refused to work the site until a comprehensive safety audit was completed. Timeline: 6 weeks minimum. The bank financing the project called to schedule an emergency meeting about changing risk parameters, and someone anonymously filed a complaint with the city, claiming the Hudson Yards Tower would cast shadows on a historic building, triggering a landmarks preservation review. Gerald's lawyer summed it up bluntly. "Someone is systematically destroying your project. Every pressure point, every vulnerability they know, exactly where to hit. Who has that kind of reach? In New York? Very few people. Real estate developers with serious money, union bosses. Or," Richard paused, "people connected to organized families, the ones who control construction, permits, labor." "You're saying the Mafia is targeting me?" "I'm saying someone with that level of influence is targeting you. And Gerald, you need to figure out why before this spreads to your other projects." That evening, Gerald asked Victoria directly, "Have you pissed anyone off lately? Done something that might have caused this?" Victoria thought about the waitress, the spilled sauce, the way she'd demanded the girl be fired. "No," she lied. "Nothing I can think of." But that night, alone in their bedroom while Gerald worked late trying to salvage his company, Victoria Googled Alessandro Vitale. The results were sparse. A few business registrations, mentions in city development news, nothing about organized crime, nothing dramatic. Just a very successful, very private businessman who controlled significant construction interests and owned Sorella, the restaurant where she'd humiliated a pregnant waitress. Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Heard about Gerald's problems. I warned you. Don't contact me again." She stared at the message, a cold dread settling in her stomach. This was really happening. Someone was destroying her husband's business because she'd been cruel to a waitress. It seemed insane, disproportionate. But then she remembered that girl's face. The humiliation, the fear of losing her job while 6 months pregnant. Maybe it wasn't disproportionate after all. Elena noticed the flowers first. She arrived for her Wednesday shift to find a massive arrangement on the break room table. Roses, lilies, orchids, easily $200 worth of flowers. The card read, "For Elena. Congratulations on the baby. Management." "Wow," Marco said, peering over her shoulder. "Management sent those? Since when does management acknowledge our existence?" Elena touched the soft petals, confused but touched. The same management that had given her paid maternity leave and banned Victoria Ashford. The same mysterious ownership that seemed weirdly invested in her welfare. Thomas appeared in the doorway. "Elena, do you have a minute?" In his office, Mr. Chen sat waiting. Again. Elena was starting to get used to these summons. "Miss Vasquez, we wanted to update you on some additional benefits." Chen pulled out paperwork. "We're establishing a childcare fund for employees with young children. When you return from maternity leave, we'll subsidize daycare costs up to $1,500 per month." Elena's jaw dropped. That's incredibly generous. The owner believes in supporting working parents." Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "Additionally, we're adding you to our health insurance plan with full pregnancy and pediatric coverage, retroactive to when you started. I have Medicaid. I can't afford the premiums for. The company will cover all premiums. You pay nothing." Elena felt tears pricking her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing to do." Chen handed her the enrollment forms. You're a valued employee, Miss Vasquez. We want to make sure you and your baby are taken care of." After she left, Elena sat in the break room trying to process everything. In the span of 4 days, her life had transformed. Job security, paid leave, health care, childcare support, things she desperately needed but never imagined receiving, all because some mysterious owner decided she mattered. Marco sat beside her. "You okay? You look like you're about to cry." "I am about to cry." Elena wiped her eyes. "Marco, who is this owner?" "Really? No idea. But whoever he is, he really likes you." That's what worried Elena. Nobody gave this much without wanting something back. But what could a powerful restaurant owner possibly want from a pregnant waitress? Thursday afternoon, Victoria Ashford sat in a deliberately modest cafe in Chelsea, waiting. She'd made this meeting through 3 intermediaries, each one more reluctant than the last. But finally, someone had agreed to talk to her. The man who sat down across from her was in his 50s, wearing a cheap suit and the wary expression of someone who'd seen too much. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm Tony Brescia, the same project manager who'd told Gerald about the equipment failures. Thank you for meeting me. I know this is, let me save us both time." Tony's voice was quiet but firm. "You want to know if someone is deliberately sabotaging your husband's project?" "The answer is yes," Victoria's breath caught. "Who?" "You don't need me to tell you that. You already know. Alessandro Vitale." Tony didn't confirm or deny, which was confirmation enough. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm here as a courtesy. A warning, if you will. What's happening to your husband's project is just the beginning. It can get much worse." "Why? What did we do?" "You know what you did." Tony's eyes were hard. "You walked into a restaurant owned by a very protective man and humiliated one of his employees. A pregnant woman trying to do her job. You made a spectacle of her. You tried to get her fired. It was just..." Victoria stopped. There was no good way to finish that sentence. "It was just cruelty," Tony said. "And Mr. Vitale doesn't tolerate cruelty toward his people, especially vulnerable people, especially pregnant women. So he's destroying my husband's company over a waitress? He's teaching you a lesson about consequences." Tony leaned forward. "Here's something you need to understand about Alessandro Vitale. He's not a gangster who breaks legs and makes threats. He's much more sophisticated than that. He controls the infrastructure that makes this city work. Permits, unions, suppliers, construction, all of it flows through networks he influences. Then how do we stop this?" "You don't. You can't. Vitale has already decided how this plays out." Tony pulled out an envelope. "But he's not without mercy. He asked me to give you this." Victoria opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 bullet points. 1. Public apology to Elena Vasquez. Televised. Sincere. 2. $500,000 donation to the Riverside Women's Center supporting pregnant women and new mothers. 3. Resignation from all charity boards for 1 year. Quietly. No explanations. "That's it?" Victoria stared at the list. "He wants $500,000 in public humiliation? He wants you to understand what you did, to feel a fraction of what that girl felt." Tony stood. "You have until Monday to decide. After that, the problems get worse. Your husband's other projects start experiencing difficulties. Your social connections start mysteriously cooling. Your name becomes associated with words like toxic and liability. You can't, Mrs. Ashford, I'm not making threats. I'm explaining reality. Alessandro, Vitale has decided you need to learn a lesson. You can learn it the easy way," he tapped the paper, "or you can learn it the hard way. Your choice." He left. Victoria sat alone, staring at the list. $500,000. Public apology. Resignation from the boards she'd worked years to join. All because she'd been cruel to a waitress. That evening, she showed Gerald the paper. He read it 3 times, his face going progressively paler. "How do we know this will actually stop if we comply?" he asked. "We don't. But can we afford not to try?" Victoria's voice was hollow. "Your project is already dead, Gerald. If this spreads to your other developments, we'd be ruined." Gerald set down the paper carefully. "Do you have $500,000 liquid?" "In my trust fund. Yes. But Gerald, this is extortion." "No. This is consequences." Her husband looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Disappointment. "Victoria, what exactly did you do to that waitress?" She told him. The whole story. The chair, The sauce, the public scene, the demand that Elena be fired. Watching herself through Gerald's eyes, she saw how it really looked. Not a woman maintaining standards, but a bully picking on someone powerless. My God, Victoria. Gerald's voice was quiet. She was 6 months pregnant. I know. And you tried to get her fired over nothing. I know. Then we're going to fix this. Not because some restaurant owner is forcing us to, but because it's the right thing to do. Gerald stood. Call that number. Set up the apology. I'll arrange the donation. The boards can survive without you for a year, maybe longer. Gerald walked to the door, then turned back. You know what the worst part is? I've watched you sit on those boards, organizing galas for children's hospitals and women's shelters, raising money to help vulnerable people, and then you turned around and treated an actual vulnerable person like garbage when you thought no one was watching. He left her sitting there with the weight of that truth. The press conference was scheduled for Saturday at noon in the lobby of the Riverside Women's Center. Elena had been asked, not ordered, asked if she would attend. Mr. Chen had personally come to her apartment to extend the invitation. You don't have to, he'd said gently. Mrs. Ashford wants to apologize publicly, but we won't force you to participate if you're uncomfortable. Will she be sincere? Elena had asked. I believe so. I think she's learned something about consequences. Now Elena stood in the back of the room, 6.5 months pregnant, watching Victoria Ashford approach a microphone surrounded by cameras and reporters. Gerald stood beside his wife, and for the first time since this began, Elena felt something like sympathy for them. They looked diminished, humbled. Thank you for coming, Victoria began, her voice steady but strained. I'm here to address an incident that occurred 2 weeks ago at Sorella restaurant. An incident where I behaved abominably toward a staff member named Elena Vasquez. The camera swiveled, trying to find Elena. She stayed in the shadows. Elena was doing her job working while 6 months pregnant, serving difficult customers with grace and professionalism. And Victoria's voice cracked slightly, I treated her with contempt. I made a scene over something trivial. I tried to get her fired. I used my position and wealth to humiliate someone who was vulnerable and doing nothing wrong. Victoria paused, collecting herself. There's no excuse for my behavior. I was cruel. I was entitled. I forgot that the people who serve us are human beings with their own struggles and dignity. And when I was called out for it, my first instinct was to double down, to blame Elena rather than take responsibility. She looked directly at where Elena stood. Elena, I am profoundly sorry. What I did was wrong. You deserved respect and kindness, and I gave you cruelty instead. I can't undo that humiliation, but I can promise to do better, to be better. Gerald stepped forward. We're announcing a $500,000 donation to the Riverside Women's Center, which provides support services for pregnant women and new mothers. Additionally, Victoria is stepping back from her board positions to reflect on how she can better serve the communities she claims to care about. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. A reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Ashford, some people are saying you're only doing this because you faced business consequences. How do you respond? Victoria didn't hesitate. They're right. I wouldn't be here if my husband's project hadn't been impacted. If I hadn't faced consequences, I would have gone on thinking my behavior was acceptable. That's shameful, but it's true. She paused. Sometimes people need to lose something before they understand what really matters. I'm grateful I learned that lesson before I lost my humanity entirely. The press conference continued for 20 minutes. Questions about accountability, wealth, privilege, workplace dignity. Victoria answered all of them, with a humility that seemed genuine because it was born from genuine loss. Afterward, as the cameras were packing up, Victoria approached Elena. No assistants, no handlers, just 2 women facing each other. I don't expect your forgiveness, Victoria said quietly, but I wanted to say, in private, that I'm sorry, truly sorry. What I did to you was inexcusable. Elena studied this woman who'd humiliated her, who'd almost cost her everything. Victoria looked older now, worn down by consequences. I accept your apology, Elena said finally. Not because what you did was okay, but because I think you actually understand now. Victoria's eyes were damp. I hope your baby is healthy. I hope you have a beautiful life. She walked away, leaving Elena standing in the lobby of a women's center funded by her suffering. That evening, Elena returned to her apartment to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000 and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Elena, this is not charity. This is what you deserved from the beginning: security, respect, the ability to bring your child into the world without fear. You showed grace under pressure. You maintained your dignity when someone tried to strip it away. Those qualities are rare and valuable. Your job at Sorella is yours for as long as you want it. But if you choose a different path, if you want to finish your degree, start a business, build something of your own, this money is a foundation. You matter. Your child matters. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. A friend. Elena read the note 3 times, tears streaming down her face. $50,000. Enough to finish college. Enough to stay home with the baby for the first year. Enough to breathe. She called the only number she had, Mr. Chen's office line. He answered on the second ring. Elena, is everything all right? I received a check. A very large check. I need to know. She couldn't finish the sentence. You need to know what the expectations are, what strings are attached. Chen's voice was gentle. There are none, Elena. Someone saw your situation and wanted to help. That's all. People don't just give away $50,000. People don't. But someone who remembers what it's like to struggle, someone who has the means to make a difference might. Chen paused. Accept the help, Elena. You've earned it just by maintaining your humanity in a city that often punishes kindness. After hanging up, Elena sat with her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. She thought about Alessandro Vitale, the man she'd never formally met, whose face she'd seen only once across a restaurant. Dining room. The mysterious owner who'd rearranged her world without asking for anything in return. Someone's watching over us, she whispered to her baby. Someone who believes we matter. In his office, Alessandro turned off the security feed from Elena's apartment building. He'd had cameras installed discreetly on her floor, not to watch her, but to ensure her safety. Old habits, from a time when watching meant survival. Luca entered without knocking. The check was delivered. Ashford made the donation. Gerald's project will resume construction on Monday. Good. The equipment failures will mysteriously resolve themselves by Tuesday. Permits will clear by Wednesday. Luca consulted his tablet. We're releasing pressure across the board. The Ashfords learned their lesson. And Elena accepted the check. Chen says she cried for 20 minutes. Luca smiled slightly. You did good, boss. Alessandro stood, walking to the window where Manhattan sprawled beneath him. His city, built on concrete and steel, and the labor of people like Elena Vasquez. People who showed up every day, worked. That's the empire that matters, Luca. Not the money or the influence. The ability to make someone's life better when the world is trying to grind them down. What about the ex-boyfriend, David Reyes? Alessandro's expression hardened. Find him. I want to have a conversation about responsibility. The threatening kind? The educational kind? Alessandro pulled up a file on his computer. Men who abandon pregnant women need to understand that children deserve support, financial and otherwise. I think Mr. Reyes can be convinced to contribute meaningfully to his daughter's future. She's having a girl? Alessandro smiled, the first genuine warmth crossing his face. According to her medical records, yes, due in February. After Luca left, Alessandro pulled up the security footage one more time. Not Elena's apartment that felt intrusive, now that the crisis had passed. Instead, the footage from the press conference. Victoria Ashford's face as she apologized. The genuine shame. The recognition of what she'd done. That was the goal. Not revenge, but education. Making people understand that their actions rippled outward, that cruelty created consequences, that power came with responsibility. Alessandro had built his empire on that principle, and he'd defend it, and people like Elena, for as long as he drew breath. 3 months later, on a cold February morning, Elena Vasquez gave birth to a healthy baby girl. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect lungs that announced her arrival with impressive volume. Elena named her Giovanna after her own grandmother, but also because Mr. Chen had mentioned once that it was a strong Italian name, meaning, God is gracious. God was gracious. Or someone was. The flowers arrived that afternoon. Another massive arrangement with a card. Congratulations on your beautiful daughter. The world is better with her in it. A. Friend. The trust fund appeared in Giovanna's name a week later. $100,000, managed by a law firm that answered Elena's questions with careful non-answers. The funds would be available for Giovanna's education when she turned 18. Until then, it would grow, protected, secure. Elena never met Alessandro Vitale face to face again. She saw him once more, a year later, having dinner at Sorella with a beautiful woman who Elena learned was his daughter visiting from Milan. He'd glanced at Elena as she passed, given the smallest nod of acknowledgement, then returned to his conversation. That was enough. Elena finished her degree at CUNY, studying at night while Giovanna slept. She graduated with honors in business administration and eventually opened her own restaurant, a small place in Queens that served honest food at fair prices and treated staff with dignity. She never knew that her business loan had been approved because Alessandro Vitale personally called the bank president. Never. Knew that her permits cleared with unusual speed because certain city officials owed favors to a particular construction company. Never knew that when her ex-boyfriend David suddenly started sending child support checks for $2,000 a month, it was because he'd had an educational conversation with a man who'd convinced him that contributing to his daughter's welfare was in everyone's best interest. All Elena knew was that her life had transformed, that she and Giovanna were safe, protected, building something good. And sometimes, late at night when Giovanna was sleeping, Elena would think about the mysterious owner who'd seen her humiliation and decided it mattered. Who'd taught powerful people that cruelty had consequences? Who'd given her the foundation to build a life worth living? There are angels, she'd whisper to her sleeping daughter. They don't have wings or halos. They have power and choose to use it for good. They watch from the shadows and make the world a little more. Just, Giovanna would stir, smile in her sleep, safe in a world where her mother had been protected when she needed it most. And 3 blocks away, in an office that overlooked the city, Alessandro Vitale reviewed security footage from Elena's restaurant, just making sure everything was running smoothly, and smiled. That pregnant waitress who'd been humiliated by a customer, she was thriving now, building her own empire, small but honest. And Alessandro Vitale was still watching. Always would be. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.